Welcome, fellow seekers of challenge and triumph, to the SufferSooner podcast. Join us on a journey where ordinary souls embark on extraordinary endeavors. From the relentless grind of gravel to the punishing gauntlet that is triathlon, we've tasted our fair share of suffering. So fellow endurance warriors, let's lace up our shoes, strap on our goggles, and dive headfirst into the challenge, knowing that with every step, stroke, and pedal forward, we grow stronger together. Welcome, guys. Episode number 36. We are joined today with Sharon from Endurance Running. She's local here in Kansas City, works down in Parkville. So it's a pleasure to have her on. She's a mom, a business owner, marathoner, PT. She's overall just a great lady to talk to. I've spent hours talking her ear off about all sorts of stuff running, and I'm not even good at running. So, she was kind enough to indulge my curiosity for running and stuff. So, so thank you for coming on and being a part of this show. So
this is new territory for us, Travis. We're some of our friends would be really proud of us. We're talking about running for a full hour here today, and it's not cycling or swimming, right?
Yeah. So if you know me, what's the one thing I do not like?
Absolutely despise running, but
yes.
But because Sharon, we've had some people try to tell us about ultra running and how much fun it is, and we're like, is it the FUN kind of fun, or what kind of fun is this? Because I'm not sure I see the fun. I know how I feel after 26 miles, and I'm not sure I feel like running another 20 miles. So
yeah,
you're gonna have to really convince us and sell us on this concept of ultra running. So
so I hear what you're saying loud and clear. I have my job cut out for me today. Yes, so understood. Thanks so much for having me on today, both of you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into this running / ultra running, marathoning? Like, were you a high school runner? Did you grow up running, or was it more of like you kind of fell into it later on?
Yeah, so I have to say I have the non-sexy story of how I came into running. So I don't have any glorious yesteryears of cross country and track. So I grew up in a very small community in northwestern Missouri and went to a very small school and lived out on a farm. And so, limited opportunities. Probably one would say there wasn't even cross country at that school, nor at my high school actually in those days. But I actually began running with my PE teacher after school. She really was the inspiration behind the start of my running. So we would literally go out after school, she and I and one of my friends, and we would run our small little 1,200 populated community after school. And I just developed a love for it. I loved getting out, being outside. I was always an outdoor kiddo anyway. And so loved just spending the time with her and just being outside and just I was very introverted growing up as well, and so I think that just suited me well to be alone with my thoughts and just really discovered this love of running, which then carried over to running the gravel road outside of town at my parents' farm. And so I would literally, we were just talking about before the show about we didn't have smart technology back then. And so I just knew from my parents' home to the neighbors was a mile and back was another mile, and I loved it. So those are my humble beginnings.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
That's great.
That's great. So you go from running as a kid. So how do you get to the path of ultra running? Let's just jump right into that because I can get my head around running the mile, and I can see, you're so did you run, say it's a mile to the house and back, that's 2 miles. Did you just run that like today I'm going to run it 10 times and then tomorrow I'm going to run it 13 times and the next day I'm going to run it 23 times? Like how do you get from just running for enjoyment and alone with your thoughts to I'm going to go do this ultra thing? I just got
so you'd love to have that one defining moment, right? Mm-hmm. That you could just pinpoint and say, this was the moment that I decided to take it, a farther distance than the farther distance. But the truth of the matter is I can't recall that. I always remember, sort of having goals. I'd accomplish one and then it would just lead to a segue naturally into the other. I remember the day that I sort of discovered that I had this bucket list item of running a marathon someday. And then And then, you do that multiple times, and then, your curiosity, I've spoken a lot, it seems like, of late, of just letting my curiosity kind of drive me these last few years. And so that's kind of where my curiosity took me here recently, into the Hood to Coast relay. And so, so that was kind of my first segue into the ultra running world. And I can honestly say there's something so visceral about that experience. It's hard to really pinpoint, but to your point, Danny, like, it's like, how do you find that drive to want to even go farther in an experience where you're, not well, not well hydrated, probably not well, your nutrition load is probably not what it should be, and you're certainly running on fumes in terms of sleep. And yet there's something so beautiful being out at 3 a.m. running this crazy mountain road in the middle of nowhere, Oregon, and you go, I got to do this again. Like, that's I got to go a little farther, and this is amazing. Yeah. So
I know people say the same thing about biking. So, we always joke about the ultra running side. The fact is we'll probably end up being there one of these days.
Well, I would always say, like, I think there's just two types of people. Like, there's people who enjoy the long run, and then people who enjoy the long bike. And so, like, it was never my goal to come out and do, the Unbound 200. Like, I heard about it before, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's great. And I've heard about, like, Western States, and, and we've talked about, like, rim to rim to rim, and, UTMB and all these, prestigious ultra running races and stuff. And I've thought, oh, that would be kind of cool. But, I never, like, put in the passion, or the one thing that got me to go into gravel. It's just like, it would just happen that I ended up moving from the desert to Missouri, and then there were no mountains here. So then I was like, well, what else am I going to do? So I started riding, and then people were like, hey, you need to ride this thing called gravel. It's pretty fun. And then I start riding gravel, and I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. So I do a 50-mile race, and then a 60, and then an 80, 100, 200. Now we're going to try to do 350. And we've done multiple, long days on the bike, and it just became this thing that, and I can see it with running too, is you get done with the 10K, you're like, oh, that was fun. And then people are talking about a half marathon. And you're like, ooh, what's a half marathon? And they're like, well, you run like 13 miles instead of the 6. And you're like, oh, so like a little bit twice. And then you're like, okay, that sounds cool. And then you get there, and then you do a couple of them. And the next thing you know, they're like, there's this thing called a marathon, and that's really cool. And then you do, so I can see it happening. I don't think, like I said, the 4 marathons I have done, they were great, but they weren't like riding my bike 200 miles across Kansas. Great.
Sure.
So so it's different. It's different things. So do you have any standout races that you think or is it always kind of like that last one was the best one? I usually do that, where like, my last race was the best race I've ever done. And then,
you walk away and you have that those endorphins are still flowing freely. And that was the best. You get asked that question a lot. And so, I always say, everyone is special in a certain way, and I don't mean to be, trivial with that response, but everyone, I walked away from that learning something about myself, something further about myself, something further about running, something further about, the whole running community as a whole. So, there are certainly some standouts, and you're right. The one that, kind of comes to the forefront at this point is the last, long-ish that I did, which was the Hood to Coast relay back at the end of August. Like I said, it was just such a visceral experience from the start to the finish, sleeping out in a cow pasture, in a sleeping bag, to, whatever you could get for that brief moment, to, staring at your third leg right in the face and going, oh my gosh, I don't know if I've got it in me to do this, but I do, and I'm going to, and we're going to race this, and somehow pulling that out, being able to do that, and in the beautiful, environment that's Oregon, it's just beautiful there. So that, that does stand out to me at this point. Certainly there have been, certain marathons, certain even shorter distance races that have just been outstanding, in various ways. So, yeah.
I was going to ask about that. So, we've talked a lot about your your passion, I guess, for running the longer distances and starting with. But have you found yourself bouncing back and forth between like short and long course type events? I mean, do you find yourself gravitating, like cycling through that, where it's like, hey, I've got like a good solid year of marathon. Now I want to go back to short course things. Like maybe talk a little bit about some of that. Like where do you find yourself sort of like what drives you between the two sets of distances?
Yeah, no, great question, because I have found that to be the very case. Actually, just in the last few years, it's, there for a while I was on such a trend of I would do two marathons a year, and of course there would be some B and C races in there, just using those as tune-ups, primarily half marathon distances. But in the course of the last couple of years, like I said, I've just been curious about other distances or returning to other distances and being, working to be competitive at those distances. I ran the Plaza 10K now the last couple of years, and I really love that race. It's a much shorter distance, but more intensive effort, just because it's a shorter distance, at least to be competitive. And so, I do find myself doing that very thing, and enjoying, and because each distance obviously employs a different effort level, a different intensity level, and it's sort of fun to work through some of those differences and challenge yourself. So yeah, exactly.
Something that Travis and I have been talking about on the bike side, and I think, Travis, we probably didn't realize it at the time, but we went down this path when we did Matt Mason triathlon. We both opted to do the short course, and everything we've done for the last, I don't know, year and a half or so, we've always picked the longest distance of every event we've done, whether it's 100, 200 mile, didn't matter. We always did the long distance. And then Matt Mason, we said, let's just have some fun. It was supposed to be the last year of it, of course, and thank goodness it wasn't. But so let's just go do the short course and let's just go punish ourselves for an hour and try to get it done, right? and it's wild because we didn't really train for that. Like our training is all built around the long distance endurance events. So going out and running that like 5K at the end as fast as you could run a 5K, which you didn't train for it. So like it's just a different energy system and different tax on the muscles and everything else. But I found that it actually kind of woke something up in me. I think like, hey, these shorter events are a lot of fun. Like they hurt a lot, but these long distance things, like it's just that slow burn over time. But man, those, oh my gosh, that 5K burned. It hurt bad. It hurt so bad. But then we got done. I'm like, I think that's been missing in my training. And so it just got me down a rabbit hole with my bike training now, where I'm focusing more on some of these higher intensity efforts. Have you found that when you have sort of cycled back to the short term, does it help sort of reinvigorate, like, hey, I have a different training, like I'm trying to, now I can elicit like a different type of training program, and maybe that will help now my long course because I'm getting faster at shorter distances. Have you found any benefits from sort of bouncing between those?
I'm a big believer as a coach in working various energy systems. Regardless, and I'm also about being, sport specific and race specific in my coaching, as you go closer to the event. But I think there's tremendous benefit in working through all of those various energy systems when you're training. It just really taps into and makes you such a much more robust athlete. And so I have noticed that for myself, and that's also, that kind of segues into the discussion of me sampling, triathlon a little bit. I really discovered that last year when I started getting involved in swimming and cycling on a more regular basis. I really felt like that supplemented at the time my run training. I was actually simultaneously training for Matt Mason's short course last year and my fall marathon. And I just really felt that benefit from that added aerobic capacity and those added hours spent in those other energy systems and tapping into different cross training, different methods. And I think there's tremendous benefit in being able to dip your toes in all of that. I think it just creates a much more performance. It really enhances performance to a greater degree.
I think I've found, and we were just talking about this in a prior episode, Travis and I were, that at least on the cycling side, I can't speak to the running side. So I'm anxious to kind of hear some of your thoughts, but on the cycling side, if you go look up any kind of, long distance events, all the training is around, low and slow efforts, right? So a lot of base training, which is fine. Everybody, we all understand the importance of having a deep base. But then the highest intensity you ever really go is a VO2 max, and you maybe do a few of those types of intervals, and you never really get into the anaerobic energy system for that type of training, which I can somewhat understand. But then you get into the actual event, you find yourself like, I probably have to go anaerobic to stay with the group I'm in, and that's a cycling function, right? I have to think in running, it's probably similar, because you know, while you probably don't, you should probably never go into a sprint effort in a marathon. You do have to tend to hold like higher energy or higher output efforts to be able to hold with if you're trying to keep pace with somebody you're trying to beat, for instance. So I was just, it's really interesting that a lot of these sort of people think, oh, I can just go online and get a training plan and download it. Maybe that's a good starting point. But I think it also limits you in a lot of ways, because they just sort of box you into the just do base miles, just do a VO2 max effort, and you don't really ever get to sample those other systems. Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, that's probably the easiest way to construct a training plan and sell that in that way is just make it simple, right? Because you don't really know your audience that's purchasing this, and so let's create something that is going to be safe for them to follow and is probably going to help them to achieve the results. You know, if they want to finish a marathon, they want to, you know, it's probably going to help them in that way. But I think when you really start tapping into the individual differences in your athletes, which is what we do, right, as coaches, I think that's really when you can start employing some of those. I know my own athletes have come to me, you know, and said, "Oh, I've never heard of a critical velocity run. What is this? Like, I've never heard of, you know, going out and running, you know, lactate threshold pace. I've never, you know, I've heard basically of tempo work, and I've heard, you know, long runs. And really, what are all these terms you're throwing out at me?" And you know, I try to explain to them, because I love that's part of what I love as a coach, is being able to educate, you know, my athletes too. It's very important to me that I explain to them why it is that I have them working this particular energy system or that energy system, so they understand. I just feel like, and I find that they're so much more invested when they actually understand why the plan says what it does. And so it's been a beautiful thing. I've had several of them complete their training cycles recently, and I always sit down with them and solicit their feedback. Tell me what went well, tell me what didn't go well, what would you like to see going forward? Have a conversation around that. And universally, they have said to me, "Oh, it was so fun to go out and do, you know, some of this faster paced work and tap into, you know, some of those other energy systems and do some of the, it just made it so much more fun. And oh, by the way, I noticed how much faster I'm getting, you know." And I mean, that's just a score all the way around, you know, for me as a coach, for them as an athlete. And it just further solidifies what I believe, which is there's tremendous benefit in working, you know, all three of those energy systems that are out there. And, you know, despite the fact that, your primary focus might be a marathon, you know, might be a 5K, but there's such benefit in distributing the work. So
yeah, you said running and lactate threshold, my legs just went on fire. So I need a minute to recover from that. Feel that burn.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh. And then you said critical velocity. I was like, oh.
I'm sensing some PTSD here.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, I had one of my athletes. He had to do basically a 20 or it's a 40-minute test, you know, running for threshold heart rate and stuff.
Sure.
And he was just at the, you know, I'm running next to him. And I'm running behind him. I'm not trying to talk to him or anything. And he's just breathing hard. And I'm just like, keep going, man. You're doing great. Just keep going. I know it sucks. And he's just like, He's just breathing. And then he was, you know, he's a trooper. But I mean, you know, we've all, you know, in this data driven age of, you know, and we had the, you know, AI generated FTP for cycling, which is your functional threshold for cycling. You know, people don't want to do that hard work sometimes. And I just, you know, and I feel like, you know, I've done enough of these tests. Yes, eventually you do enough, you know, critical run tests, or you do enough FTP tests that you can kind of just be like, okay, I know where my threshold, I know this feels like threshold, you know, and I use that with, I mean, you could go out for, I'm like, show me your, you know, tempo pace. And I'd be like, well, how fast do you think you're running? You're like, oh, like, I don't know, like 8:30s or whatever, you know, you'd know it. You just know it by feel.
Yes.
And then, you know, but that's, however long we've been doing this, like
Right.
20 years or something like this. It'll be almost 20 years for me doing triathlon. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's just that experience is kind of what you're taking into account when we're coaching these athletes.
Yeah.
And especially, you know, talking with you coach that way too. If you're just like, I really don't want you to make the same mistakes I made. So like, so just listen
I've
to
done
me.
them. Yes.
Just listen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of that people have to learn on their own, but
Yeah.
if you can help them and just shortcut a few of those, like some of these, like you don't have to punish yourself. Let me help you,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But to your
Yeah.
point, like I agree, and you know, you and I, Travis, had this conversation here recently. Is just I really try to impress with my athletes. You know, it's so important to hone that feel, that feel of what the pace should feel like. I absolutely love the technology that we have available to us, and I really try to coach them toward, you know, that's a tool in your toolbox, but don't be a slave to it. Like really hone that feel.
Mhm.
And I feel like we've gotten to this place of, because we have access to all of this technology, that we're so dependent upon it telling us what we're doing in the way of pace, in the way of heart rate, in the way of everything, and whether I ran that run or not.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, you know, it's so important. And I love the story. Did you guys hear the story of Kelvin Kipton last year at the Chicago Marathon?
No.
This is a fantastic story. So, you know, he set the new world record there last year.
Yep.
Yeah, I was there, got to see it. It was amazing. But in the last 10K, he literally took his watch off and he tossed it into the crowd. And what he said later is he didn't want to be dictated by his device as to how he should run that last 10K. He felt in himself what he could do. And he went out and did it, you know, unrestrained, unrestricted by the technology. And I think that's a perfect example of how, you know, how we should all, and you know, if you talk to the elites or you listen to many of the interviews with them, that's what they're honing, is they're honing that sense of feel and pace. And I think that's just vital to maturing as an athlete, you know, in the space, and really, you know, perfecting our skill at that. So
Yeah, I think we're seeing that too. And Travis, didn't that happen on the pro cycling this spring? One of the riders,
Toddy,
yeah, he ditched his bike computer
his bike computer, and he was just like, I just race. And a bike race is a little bit different. Like, I mean, it's the same in running too, but there's more tactics at play because it happens faster on biking than it doesn't. You maybe get one or two tactics to play out during running, and I've never been there. I've just only heard stories about it. But but as far as a bike, like, you know, the guy in front of you doesn't care how hard you're going. Like you just have to go as hard as he is, or you have to go harder and beat him. And so, and like, just because the number on my watch tells me that I'm in, you know, lactate threshold or I'm in VO2 max, it's like, I don't, okay, well, you know, what am I going to do? Tell him to wait up because we're in VO2 max? It's like, he didn't care. And so, so you're just, you know, when you get to and I always find this, it used to be more so, you know, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, when I first thought about coaching is the idea that, you know, the beginners start out just by going out and doing the thing and getting a feel for it. And then they get into the technology, and then they get refined. And then you have the pros who just go out and do the thing by feel. That's it. Eventually it's just this whole arc of you rely so much on technology, and then eventually you just find out that, you know, you're honing your senses, and it's really just you developing your sense of pace, sense of effort, sense of, you know, when I tell my athletes, I give them three things, you know, usually it's heart rate, pace or power, and then, you know, your RPE. And it's just like, you have to have two of those. You have to have two of those in alignment to make a decision. So if it feels too hard, then your heart rate and your power better be higher, you know, or if your power is low, but it feels hard, then, you know, you can make decisions from that, because, you know, eventually it's giving them the ability to feel the workout or feel the effort, and then know, because a lot of times, you know, I've seen this happen, especially with, you know, intermediate athletes, and I know you've seen them too. they just go, well, I just held 730s the whole time and I don't understand why I blew up.
Right.
Right.
Well, did it feel hard? Yeah, it was excruciating from the start. Like, and you're like, well, then why did you continue? Well, because that's the pace.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, well, you didn't have that pace before. Like that
Right.
wasn't on the day. And you know, and people trip out too when I tell them, like, you know, we have one of our good friends, Matt. He's going to ride a gravel race with us this coming weekend. And he's also, what's your strategy? I was like, you know, I never know, because I don't know if the legs show up, we're racing. If they don't show up, I'm just surviving.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
you know, and that's what my philosophy has become. The past folks have asked me, actually just asked me this last weekend at a group run that I hosted here for my practice. And I said, you know, my strategy has become, let's just go out and see what we can do today. You know, of course I have my goals, but let's go out and see what we can do. Let's just open up the door and just see what's possible here. And, you know, the thing about, you know, all the different metrics, the heart rate, the pace, there's so many different things that it can affect that. You know, the weather can affect that, how much sleep I got last night, whether it was quality sleep, and how much stress I've got going on in my life. Like, so many things can affect those things that, you know, if I tell you to go out and run a zone 2 easy effort run, and I want you to keep that effort between, you know, 3 to no more than a 4 out of 10. Well, that's a lot simpler to do, no matter what my heart rate might be, no matter what my pace might be that day. Like, I can still always be true to my effort. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in just honing that effort level.
Yeah. I've had athletes before in the past go, well, how was that effort? I was like, oh, it was a 3. I was like, really? Because your heart rate said 165.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, unless you're a hummingbird.
That's right. Well, I do drink sugar water.
I do drink sugar water.
That should work, right? Gatorade,
Right?
You know, yeah.
So great. So you did come over to the dark side and you did do a triathlon. I do want to hear how you thought that went. How was that?
Yeah. So again, my curiosity, right, led me in that direction. And I have to credit, you know, the athletes that I've seen here in clinic over the couple of years who piqued my interest in that regard. And so, so I did the short course at Matt Mason last year. It was so much fun. You know, I tell people I'm motivated by what scares me a little bit, you know, it kind of takes me and goes, I don't know.
It's got to be a little scary. Yeah, there's got to be a little bit of doubt in there to make you honest. Yeah.
That's right. I got to lean into that, you know, anything that's a little scary, I got to lean right into that. So yeah, it was fun. And boy, did it, like I said, did it open my eyes to just the sport of triathlon and what a different animal that is. I love it. So much respect for those of you who, you know, really hone that as your craft. Like that's outstanding, you know?
Yeah.
So,
but you know what stinks is
super fun.
What really stinks is you runners get to walk right in and then just look like naturals at it, because we all know triathlon favors runners, and I am not a runner, so I'm super jealous of that. Just putting that out there. So.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I do have to say that, you know, folks say, well, how did you feel about it? And so I turned around and I did the long course this year at Matt Mason. You know, that's how inspiring it was to me. I'm like, let's just push on that accelerator a little bit more and see what this is all about in a little bit greater fashion. And, you know, I tell folks it's been like this, like swimming is my my lowest strength of the 3. And so it's like, okay, just make it through the swim. And then biking is, you know, I can sort of, it's similar to me in a lot of ways to running. And then I'm like, okay, just get me on the course and I'm good, you know?
Yeah.
It was great.
And then you just pass everybody.
That's right.
I know exactly who you are. I've been passed by you many a times.
Spent the last 50 miles building up a lead to have it washed away in a mile. Yeah, I know.
Well, Travis, you did fly around me on the bike. I saw you this year, so you know.
Yeah, if we were doing if I was doing the long course instead of the short course, you probably would have came close to catching me on the run.
Yeah.
So I can only, like I say, you know, my issues with the run is just, you know, I have the engine is there, just something's weird. So, but yeah, so you like triathlon? Are you going to try a longer distance, or you think Olympic is pretty good. I'm gonna tell you, you don't have to go in like you did marathon and then go to ultra and then you're doing you're doing Ironman back to back and then you're and then our friend Nando, he's talking about doing the 70.3 at Wisconsin and then doing the Ironman the next day. So he's talking to me about, he's like, well, what do you think I should do? I'm like, I don't know, dude. Call a therapist.
Well, it does have that sort of effect, right? Everybody wants to know, you do one thing, it's like, well, what are you going to do next? Are you going to take that a little bit longer? You're going to go 7.3, you're going to do the full Ironman. And, I haven't decided yet, to be really honest. I sort of, like I said, I let my curiosity guide me these days. And I haven't gone wrong yet when I've allowed that to do that. I've discovered, new and beautiful things and pushed back the limits and met so many great people and discovered, great things about, yourself as you do in the process, and not so great things about yourself, it's all part of the deal, and you grow. And so, I'm not exactly sure. I was listening to your podcast you all had recently about, it's goal planning time for next year, and kind of right in that too. I'm thinking about next year, and I'm going to be perfectly transparent. I turn the big 50 next year, so I've told everybody, I know. I've told everybody I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to go into it, just
lean into it.
My arms and the sky's the limit. Let's do it all.
Hang on, Travis. My audio. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you just say you're signing up for Ironman next year? I think that's what I heard. So that's what I heard in my headset. I heard you're signing up for an Ironman next year. So congratulations in advance.
Well,
choose wisely. There's plenty to choose from, but
let us know.
Well, hey, I know who to come to for coaching, for guidance, for the experts right here. I know.
For a shoulder to cry on. For sure.
That's right. Yeah, right. That's good. All right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you got into triathlon because of people that you work with, and so maybe let's use that as a way to transition to your business, because it's one thing to do this running stuff for fun. It's something else when you could sort of build a business around it. And I know you do run coaching, but you have your own business that you're a PT as well, right?
That's right. Correct. Yeah.
So maybe just tell us a little about that journey and how that's, for obvious reasons, as a PT, you have a tremendous amount of knowledge about how the body works that most of us, Travis and I primarily don't have. And I think that has to be a huge advantage. Just how has that helped your training? And I assume that it's because of your love of running and athletics that you kind of went down this path in the first place.
Yeah, it's huge. It's an interesting journey, actually. So, like I said, I've ran since I was 12, 13 years old, and didn't get really competitive with it till a bit, later in life, and then kind of went with it along that line. I've been a PT for 25 years, worked in about every setting, and it was really, maybe 3 to 4 years ago that I just started recognizing the fact that it was going to be time for a change, given where I was currently at. And like I said, I've worked in about every setting. So of course you kind of thumb back through the Rolodex and you try on different, hats that you've worn in the past to see if it still fits. And is that the right fit going forward? And none of those previous hats were, but the thing that I kept coming back to was, and you know how it is with all of us, you get pulled into helping friends, helping neighbors, helping family members with, hey, can you help me? I'm going to do this couch to 5K thing. And what can you tell me about that? And, then by the way, my knee is bothering me. So what can you do to help me with that? And so I just kept coming back to, hey, why don't we create a business out of what we love and spend the rest of, potentially the rest of my years doing just that. And so that's what I created. I created a business here in the Northland, located in Parkville, that is a very running specific or endurance sports business. So I am a certified running specialist. And so that's what I do in here all day long is really help folks with running related injury rehab. And that can take the form of a field athlete who's hurt, on the field playing soccer, whatever, up to the more traditional runners like myself and you all. And then, you know, obviously as well, I'm a certified gait analyst. So I do video gait analyses here as well, get folks on the tread, take a peek at kind of what's going on in their gait mechanics from the perspective of, you know, most of the reasons for that usually are, you know, is there any kind of economy that I can pick up from a performance enhancement perspective? And then the other side to that is, you know, I keep having these recurring injuries, and I really feel it's important to look at what's going on mechanically with those folks to try to see where the forces are being distributed and how that continues to happen. So so those two pieces. And then, as you mentioned, I'm a certified run coach. I should say I'm currently in the certification process to also coach the short sprints. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a number of youth athletes come to me and are really wanting to hone their top end speed and kind of work through acceleration, deceleration. And so decided to go ahead and take it on myself to really hone that a bit more.
Right.
So yeah, awesome. So that's what I do.
That's great. Great. That's great.
So I think it's interesting because you mentioned, you know, you probably got it a lot before you started your business where friends and family would, like you said, they want to start a couch to 5K, or maybe they're, you know, found their way on their fitness journey, which is how a lot of us get started. You know, you get a little bit older in life and you decide, you know what, hey, I need to do something about my health. Right. And so it's a natural progression to start getting into running or cycling or any of these sports. What's interesting though, I think is, and at least I see this in cycling, is people will find a way to sort of train themselves to a certain volume, whatever that volume is. It's usually on the lower end of a spectrum. And then all of a sudden the injuries start to creep in. And, or I guess vice versa, they could just go out too hard, too fast, and they're pulling muscles. But a lot of times I think what you mentioned was like, you know, I've never had knee pain, and now all of a sudden I've got a knee pain. And it's probably due, you know a lot more about this than I probably do, to some sort of a muscle imbalance or some sort of thing like that. So like, when should people like come to see you? Because a lot of these people are like new starting their journey, but this is something that could happen to even, you know, seasoned veterans of a sport as well. So like, when do you find, like, do people wait too long to come see you, or do they just come in just because they're sore now? Like, what's the good time? How would you sort of explain that?
Yeah, great question. You know, most of the time folks are coming in to see me. They've already been to a provider or two, potentially. They've been told to rest, you know, rest, don't run, you know, of course, that's the answer always.
Stop moving. So it just gets chronically worse.
You know what? Then take a break. Take a break. I'm
take some of these pills.
I'm going to set you up with a surgeon, and we're going to get you all squared away. Right? Yeah. Yes, I work in healthcare, so I'm a little bit jaded towards this because I see it all the time, where there's these sort of predisposed care management paths that the people just find themselves on, and the doctor just follows the path. They don't really treat the individual, and that's why I think, especially people in the PT arena, or you talk about individualized care, it doesn't get much more individualized than that. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just thinking, like, I love how that just went, because most people, they don't know any better and they get told to rest, and that may not be the best thing for them.
No, and then you know, they're coming in and you know, I always am sitting down with them, kind of wanting to know the history of this, the onset, and it's really remarkable, because often the case is this has been going on 6 months, 9 months, a year, over 2 years. Recently had a client over 2 years, and you know, and my heart goes out to these folks, because they've gotten to the place where I'm kind of the last resort, and I've come in, and they will actually verbalize, you know, I've just come to the place where maybe running is not my sport. Like, maybe I'm not cut out for running. And that's just not the case. You know, there are very few instances where that could potentially be the case. You know, there's some certain autoimmune disorders and some things where potentially maybe that just creates too much inflammation in the body. And yet I still think that can be managed. But so in answer to your question, and I might take a two-pronged approach to that, Danny, actually, because I think it kind of segues nicely into the fact that I am what's called a cash-based practice. So in my practice, I don't hold contracts with insurance providers. So I'm not in network with Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield, and you know, you take your pick of the different insurance providers out there. And a lot of times people will ask me, well, why did you go in that direction? Because here in the Midwest, folks are so programmed to, I go to see a medical professional, I flip out my insurance card, bada bing, bada boom. And I said to them, it comes by way of the fact that I've been a PT for 25 years and I've worked in that domain. And it's, to be perfectly transparent, insurance is really dictating care in our current day and age. It's really reducing the autonomy of healthcare providers to being able to practice in ways that they feel good about. And that's why you see it's not just been the effect of COVID, which sometimes it gets assigned to that. It's really been the influx of and the overwhelming control, if you will, that insurance companies now have on healthcare providers, and the fact that people don't want to provide care in that way, and so they remove themselves entirely from the profession. And so when I opened my business, and I haven't wavered, I don't to this day, despite the fact that yes, it's been a challenge to help people to see that specialized care, one-on-one care, an assessment that takes 90 minutes, a treatment visit that takes 60 minutes, like you're going to have to pay out of pocket for that kind of specialized high quality care. So you know, that's the other challenge to this is getting people to understand that. And it's not, like I said, most folks who come in and go through the assessment, you know, they get it from the first visit. And, you know, so, but yeah, most folks are coming in quite delayed in their potential rehabilitative process that could have been started a lot sooner. And, you know, I was listening to another of your podcasts where you talked about injuries, and I think it's really important to be good about, you know, what constitutes going to that next level. And you all talked about that. And I think in the way in which I educate is it's when that something becomes consistent, becomes progressive, and it begins to limit your ability to do your sport, to do what you love.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really important. I love how you sort of said that. And it's like, to me, it's like a lot, like you said, a lot of people, their first stop is, well, I just go see my primary physician, primary care. And like you said, once you do that, you're sort of wrapped up in the ecosystem of the insurance company and the big medical systems and all of that. And, you know, without going too deep into that side of the industry, there is such a thing as like incentivized care and incentivized reimbursement models and all these things that drive the decisions that care providers make. And where I think you just hit the nail on the head is, your incentive is to get this person back on their feet as quickly as possible. It's specific for them, because that's how you're going to get paid, is they come back to you when they realize that you helped me get over my situation. If this ever happens again, now I have somebody I can trust. Yeah,
exactly. So. And, you know, I feel like such a large part of what I do is education. You know, I'm educating my athletes all of the time about their injury, about how to prevent recurrence. I tell every one of them I am so committed to recurrence. And that is why I am going to, long after the pain is, you know, in the traditional medical model, when your pain is gone, you're healed and you're on your way, and go ahead and return to your sport. Well, we know on the research side of things that the capacity takes a lot longer to build beyond that I no longer have pain piece. And so I let them know from the very beginning, my commitment to myself and to the community when I opened my practice was to prevent recurrence of injury, because the injury rate amongst runners is so high. I think the recent stats I read was something like 8 in 10 runners will become injured at some point. It's immensely high. And so, you know, I have to say, I'm super happy I have not seen one person back in my clinic with a recurrence of the injury that I rehabilitated them from. So it may be that they've been back because, unfortunately,
something else.
Sure.
When you fix the tire, the transmission breaks down. You're like, oh man.
But I will also say that, you know, Plaza 10K was so fulfilling for me, not just for the fun that it was to go out and race that distance, but I saw so many previous runners and athletes that I've had in my clinic that I've helped get back, and they're out there just tearing it up. And it was just it was so awesome.
So rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I do the same thing, because I used to work at the Play Tri here in Kansas City, and, you know, I see people that I know from the triathlon, and when triathlon's an even smaller community than the runners, you know, and you'll go to a race and you'll be at, you know, we were in Chattanooga. I ran into like 2 people I knew. And I was like, oh man, you're just like, oh, I didn't know you were doing this race. That's crazy. It's awesome. Yeah. Anytime you go anywhere, you're just like, I know that person, you're like, oh, and then we'll be at a gravel race, and I'll be talking to we were at Unbound, and I was talking to this Air Force guy, and we found out that he did one of the local races here in Lawrence, and I was like, oh, I remember you, like, and I have this crazy race remember, and I was like, yeah, I went past you on this descent, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember you and it's just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What Travis left out is he remembered the jersey that guy was wearing, which is even like, I'm like, goodness gracious, I don't even know how you, whatever.
The back.
Yeah. Right.
I remember his kit. It's weird. So, but you see these people that you've helped along the way, and you were talking about run gait analysis and all that stuff, and people ask me too, like, when do you get a bike fit? And I'm like, the best case is before you even buy the bike. The second best time is after you buy the bike, and then you come and get one. And I don't know if this is true with running or anything, and this is a good question to ask, but like, how often does your gait change? Does it change 6 months, 3 months, 2 years? Like, the more running I do, does my gait start to change after a while? Or is it something that like, or is it shoe dependent? Is it kind of like, these are some questions like I always have rattling around in my head for sure. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Here's the truth of the matter is, all of us think we look differently when we run than we actually do.
Oh, I know I look horrible. You see me, I've seen you run. You look happy and super excited to be there. You look great. Me, I know I look like just hot trash, just running down. You're like, I can just see you just look over. You're like, oh my God.
I'd like to tell you you're wrong, Travis. I can't.
Dumpster fire.
They're like, you're next time I run next to him at English Landing, I'm pushing him into the river. We're doing everybody a favor.
Put him out of his misery.
The office. No, kidding. No, I'm actually speaking for myself, because I had my daughter, I have her periodically just video me. She doesn't really know a whole lot about but she's caught on to some of these things. So, and I never forget the first time I looked at myself, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I am absolutely not the East African gazelle that I feel like I am.
Yeah.
I'm looking like the rhinoceros from the plains there in Africa, whatever. But I think there's tremendous benefit to each of us having our gait analyzed. And what we know is, and it's interesting because Travis, you and I have talked a lot about just all of the noise that's out there. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there in our space. So it's really important to get down to the nitty gritty of what's truthful. And so what we know from the research and the evidence is really tweaking folks' gait pattern immensely doesn't make good sense. Like, people will evolve generally over time into the most economical, most efficient gait pattern. So to go messing with that in enormous ways is not to their benefit. That's not to say that if, and I've had some really high performing athletes come from out of state even to have some gait analyses completed, and they're performing at the national level, etc. And they're wanting to know, is there anything that I could tweak to make myself more economical, to pick up a few seconds or what have you? And sometimes there are. So in those instances, I think it makes good sense. Like I said, I also, in instances where there's just tremendous inefficiencies that are taking place that are just making, the effort feel so much harder than it has to be, really working with folks to try to make some of those really simple things actually. But I do tell people that takes time. It's not simply something where, you go on YouTube and it says, oh, hey, you need to just pick up your cadence to 180 and you'll be good to go. It's not that simple. And it's really a rewiring almost, if you will, of the brain and body to make those changes. And we know that takes time, and it takes an absolute intentional approach to that utilizes phased feedback systems, et cetera, to make sure that change is relatively permanent and is one of those things I talk to people all the time about, feeling what that feels like, instead of just just running according to the cue that I'm giving them, or whatever that, external cue is that's taking place. So, but I think there's tremendous benefit to everyone having their gait analyzed from that perspective. What we do know it's not a good predictor of injury. So you can have folks that, have a tremendous, pelvic drop, or you have tremendous, trunk rotation, excessive trunk rotation, or crazy arm swing. I mean, if any of us have watched Paula Radcliffe race, or, and you'll see that even in the elites, they have a very, what do we want to say? It's very specific to them, and it may not necessarily lead to an injury at any point. So we really have to be careful about when we start messing with things.
Yeah. I mean, we see it all over the sports. I mean, you see, swimmers, elite swimmers, they have their own style. Elite cyclists. I mean, I can spot people I've coached swimming. I can see them in, the murky Smithville waters as they're getting out of it. Just because I've watched their swim so long that you just kind of see, and it's just, I don't know how else to describe it. You're just like, I know who that is. I know you.
Right.
And then you'll be biking, and you'll, somebody that you rode with for a long time, you'll see them again, and they have the same kind of pedaling style. And you're like, oh yeah, I remember, I remember riding with you. It's, I think running's the same way. Like I say, my thing is, and I'll use me as an example, is like the engine's there. I have the endurance. I've been running not like consistently every day or every week, but I've been running for, I don't know, like almost 15 years, relatively injury free. I just have not been able to, increase the speed. And so that's just, and that's, and that's why, like, I think that's when you get to a point where like you were saying, like you get to a point where, you've done the training, you kind of get the feel of what it is. And maybe it's just that I need to, suffer more or something like that,
That's the answer right there.
Kind of getting a baby. But I think that the gait analysis and that other stuff is great. I attribute it to, like, getting a bike fit. Your bike fit changes, from, we can get people into these super bendy aerodynamic positions because they have full range of motion at the extremes of their joint positions and stuff like that. Well, then they take about a month off or 2 months off, and now they're not as flexible as they were. And so it's like, you got to come all the way back up, and your fits change. So I always recommend people definitely, they do a bike fit, the beginning of the season, and then usually, like 6 weeks before their race, so they can optimize their position. But, stuff like that. So
absolutely. And we do know, very similar to running, we know as we age, certainly, and certainly you could insert other things in the mix there. Sure, if you take a substantial time off, you've had an injury that you've rehabilitated from, there are a lot of things that can change that. So same thing. I do recommend, and typically if someone's come in and they've worked with me on some run gait coaching, following that, changing some different dynamics in their mechanics, I do recommend that they come back just to so we go through a process, obviously, and then even when we're finished with that process, like, come back in 6 months and let's check this again and see if that's holding true, or if we have other things playing a role in that. So very, very similar, I would say, too. And we know that just from, I mean, we're not the same person today that we were yesterday or last week. So things are changing and evolving all of the time. So
and I'm sure you've noticed this too, is like how you run on the treadmill. You like is kind of different from how you run outside. And so, like, that's the same way, like you're like, oh, we're doing these changes to my gait or whatever. And then the next thing, I tried them outside and now my knee hurts. And it's like, oh, okay. Yep. And so, like, all right, so now we got to, like kind of look and see stuff like that. Cause I fit people on, inside on a trainer. And then, I'm always like, you basically have 3 months from the fit to, like, make sure that this fit works. And like, and they, they'll call me in 2 weeks. They're like, oh, so now my, like, saddle hurts. And I'm like, okay, so now you got to come back. Cause like, and I'm like, was it outside or inside? They're like, outside. I'm like, okay, so we have to adjust you we have to get you adjusted for the actual training that you're going to end up doing. So,
Yeah.
like you have to take that kind of into effect, which it sounds like you kind of do too.
Yeah, it has to be a reassessment, because like I said, those things don't just happen overnight. It's not that you offer someone a cue and then they just automatically go out and repeat that. There are times, and I have to make sure it's the right cue, because there are times I can offer a cue and then lo and behold, I get fallout in some other area, like you just mentioned, like, oh, all of a sudden my knee's hurting or the saddle's hurting, or same thing. And so I tell them, this is a commitment over some time. This isn't, just you come in for an analysis and you walk away with these wonderful cues that now you just go practice and you're good to go. But no, it's a constant reassessment of sorts. And it's not like it has to be, a couple times a week or anything to that degree of frequency, but because there is some time that needs to go on to be able to see how that's going to fit and is it going to accomplish, the goal. But agreed, same thing.
Yeah, I think it's tough because so much in society is instant gratification or instant results. So people would expect the same, right? They're like, "Oh, I'm going to go see Sharon," and she told me I needed to work on this cue.
She's going to make me 2 minutes faster per mile. And
right?
It's
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what goes on here.
So next week it's on. Yeah.
She might make you 2 minutes faster per mile, but that might come over the course of a year.
Right.
And at starting out, you may be 30 seconds slower per mile. Until you start ingraining the patterns. And that's, teaching swimming is, people, they freak out about their pace. And I'm like, you have to slow down and get the pattern basics ingrained that I'm trying to teach you. And then you will be faster because you'll be more efficient. But it's just like, you can't just you're not going to go out the gun being Michael Phelps. When I tell you what you're doing, you're not going to go fast. It takes hours and hours in the pool, yardage, and same thing with running. And I totally understand that, like, especially with cycling too, you can't just come out of the door just crushing everybody. You need to put in your time.
But why is that, Travis? When I can go to Walmart or the grocery store and I can get right in, I don't even have to wait in line. I just check out and...
Well, I can get faster. I just got to buy the latest super shoes and I'll be fast, right? That's what they want me to believe. Spend $300. Buy this $300 pair of shoes.
Yeah, so that's a good cue. I definitely want to bring that up, but we're gonna let's finish up the discussion with your business. How is the best is this email, endurancerunningpt@gmail, is the best way to get in touch with Sharon, and she will talk to you and get you signed up and get you in and all that stuff, right?
You got it. Yes, that's a great contact point as far as email is concerned. I'm also have a webpage, so endurancerunningpt.com. So
okay, I didn't have that.
So they can look at the services that I offer online and can actually book a session online as well, and the pricing's there as well. And, often I tell people, don't feel like it has to stop there. Like, if you have a question or you have a concern or you're not quite sure which of the services you could most benefit from, hey, pick up the phone and call me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you over the phone to really make sure that I help you in the best way that I can and get you connected to the right service to start with. And so that's always an option as well. Because sometimes folks just don't know. They don't know where they need to start. They know they've got this issue or they've got this concern, but they just are not quite sure where to start with things. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as coming from somebody who, like, of course, everyone's like, oh, you're an average runner, and I am average. I get that. I'm an average pace runner. I understand that, but I feel like I could just be a little bit better, and that's all I'm coming from. And so that's like, even if you like, I always tell especially beginner athletes and stuff like that. If you want to do this, especially if, like, speaking to you, if you want to do Ironman or something like that, coming down the road, like, invest in either the coaching or the, bike fit or the stuff kind of up front makes the whole process enjoyable. 'Cause you don't want to find out 3 months before your big race that the bike that you're riding is too small or is causing you to have some kind of hip impingement that's affecting everything else that's going on. You don't want to find that out then, and then you're scrambling to buy a new bike or get
it's
stuff
just added
made.
stress you don't need.
So if you're definitely, if somebody's planning on running or doing any kind of running and just being better at it, like, just being seen by somebody is huge.
And I think this too, and I think you all would say that about even more so from a triathlon perspective is, you're investing so much money in this process anyway, from your race registration, if you're traveling any distance, the hotel fees, the airfare that goes with it, the shoes, the whatever, is part of your kit. Why not invest money on the really meaningful things, which are going to allow you to approach, or get to the starting line in a healthy body and ready to run that race to the best that you can. Just makes sense to really, invest the time, the energy, the money on the front end to ensure that you have your best, put your best foot forward. Sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then they can follow you on Endurance Running on Facebook and Instagram too.
You got it.
And then, great. So,
yeah.
Now let's get to the super shoe question.
Did you see how I said best foot forward? I was I was following Danny's cue. And
that's right.
Going right along. Yeah.
So, me and Danny have debated the super shoe issue to death. So we really like, I'm like, but if it helps you for 10 seconds off your minute time, then isn't it worth it? So give us the lowdown. Be the deciding factor.
The decisive line in the sand here is going to go on. That puts lots of pressure on you two.
No, it'll be. I'm sure it's going to be. It depends.
It depends.
So it's true. It's true, right? And I hate that response, right? Because it would be so nice. It was more definitive, but. So I'll speak from two different perspectives along that line. So the first perspective is, what does the research say about it? And we have to be careful about when we look at research, right? Like who's funding it and all these sorts of things. And so that kind of takes a trained eye to look and make sure that the studies are worth their while, and we can draw some conclusions from those. But so we know, several years ago when Nike came onto the scene, with the first super shoe and made the claims about, on average taking off 4%, off of average marathon time. Well, the truth of the matter is when we really dig in and look at that, they were primarily looking at folks who raced anywhere from mid 5s to low 6s per minute mile, not hours, but minute mile.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if it's 4% off of my 4.5 hour marathon time, that's
it's not.
That's a huge thing.
So really they were looking at elites, right?
Yeah.
That's really what they were looking at.
Yeah, they're talking about like you're getting 4% at a 2:15 marathon. Yeah, or something like that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And really when you look at the scope of that, it was more like 1 to 7%, 4 being the average really that they shook out of that. When you look at some more recent studies, so even as early as a year ago, really it's still about that amount, but they've broken it down a little bit more succinctly to the average everyday runners like ourselves to say that if you're anywhere from an 8-minute miler to we'll just say 8-minute plus, you're probably looking at 1% or less of a pickup in your economy from that. Now, so leave that to the to the individual as to whether that makes sense or not. But but you're most likely not going to see the 4% that we all are super familiar with from the media. And it's so where does that come from and why is that? Well, athletes that are running at those faster paces are exerting much more force through those shoes. So that foam, that special foam that these shoes are constructed out of, that carbon fiber plate is much more responsive under those types of driving forces is the thought behind that. Whereas those of us who perhaps run a little bit slower than those 5 or 6 minute per mile, we're not exerting as much force. And so we're not loading that foam, loading that carbon fiber plate like that to be able to get as much of that energy return as those faster folks. So But let me tell you, on a personal line of things, boy, does it feel amazing to put those things on, you know, like you just feel like you are race ready when you put those on, I tell you.
But were you faster?
She was probably faster. Yeah.
I'll be perfectly transparent. So I ran my PR in the marathon, not in carbon, not in
That's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah.
However, that was before super shoes were kind of really on the scene.
It's fine.
So then I ran my second fastest time several years later in super shoes on the same course. So
with a lot more training under your belt too.
Well,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. and the wisdom
right?
and the wisdom gained of a PR years before, right? So yeah.
True, Danny. That's so true. All of that goes into it.
I'm just looking at it going $300 for maybe 4 seconds a mile, maybe.
And then you only get what 100 and something miles out of them. So that's you know, 150 miles.
That's the thing.
I probably get less because I'm such a bigger guy.
They actually say one race and you're good. Like they're cooked after one race. So yeah, for me, that's I'm not making that decision, you know. But anyway, to each his own and make those decisions. But yeah,
exactly. That's how I look at it too. I think, you know, hey, if somebody wants to go spend their money, who am I to tell them how they should or shouldn't spend it? Enjoy it.
It's like buying a bike, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've got a bike that's much faster than I am. I mean, I got a bike that wins world tours, but there's no way in hell I'm winning a world tour anytime soon. So it's fine. Like I get it. I get it. It's you want to buy nice things. I'm not here to judge anybody.
Right. Right. Sure. Exactly. You know, where I do, you know, and I'll just insert this from the physical therapist perspective. You know, I do get the question, does it make good sense for me to train in my, you know, carbon fiber shoes? I'm not a big proponent of doing lots of training in that type of shoe, especially if you're a 8+ minute miler, because I think that loading those structures in that way, you're kind of asking potentially for some issues. So
yeah, because it's giving you energy back, right? So that means that the force is coming back up from the ground. So like if you've ever just like, you know, when you ever go to a track and you run on the track for the first time, you get a lot of energy return from the track surface. And then, you know, I've ran on a track once when I was younger and I was like, man, why am I so sore? Like my muscles hurt so bad. And it was just full on DOMs. And I was just like, and then I looked into it and it was like, oh yeah, because you're getting energy return on the track. And I'm like,
those track surfaces are designed in a certain way to be able to offer that. So you just have to understand what's taking place, or have someone help you to understand what's taking place, and hopefully guide you in educated ways to make good decisions. Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice. So let's see. Is there do you do any kind of group runs or anything that like people can be involved in and get to know you and stuff like that? Because I know we have a group ride. We have a no drop group ride on Wednesday nights. Unfortunately, I've been missing from it this last couple of weeks. I am learning to teach young kids and toddlers and adults how to swim. So I'm doing the Red Cross, WSI water safety program over there at Gladstone. So if you want to learn how to swim and you want to be safe in the water. So
yes, and if you want to further add to your endurance building, you will teach toddlers and children how to swim. My daughter is experiencing that. She works at the Y now, and yes, it's teaching her
teach the future triathletes.
That's right.
That's circular model.
There you go.
Keep funneling them in. No, it would be great if
Coach Travis, you know, it all started with him.
Yeah, you never know. Absolutely. So, you know, a big fan of ours too, and we love her, is Katie Renner. She does Johnson County Parks and Rec down there, and she works with Josh Wolf and stuff. And I just kind of take a page out of her book and just have more, you know, little kid tries up here in the Northland and stuff. And
I had no idea that was a thing until this year, actually.
Yeah, it's crazy. So triathlon here in the Midwest, I mean, we could talk about it all kinds. It's very like kind of one of those like best kept secrets. Like this is I would say for triathlon, this is probably one of the best places to train because you have the heat that you're going to deal with, because you don't run your Ironman marathon in the morning. You run it in the afternoon, like 2 in the afternoon, 2 to 4 in the hottest part of the day. You are running a Ironman marathon. So, here training, like that's why, Kona, like people who go to Kona and stuff come and train out here because it's 100 degrees with 100% humidity. It's kind of the perfect training grounds. But
look what we have to offer here in the
Yeah, right.
Midwest.
No
here in the
kidding.
Midwest. The only thing we don't have is mountains. We had that, it'd be perfect.
We don't have elevation, right?
It's true.
Well, I experienced that. I didn't share with you that I ran the leg of the Tulsa 70.3 last year as part of the relay. And so you're right. That was an eye opener for me to go out in the middle part of the day and run a half marathon. So
yeah, because we always do the training for marathon. We're like, all right, we're gonna get up at 5 a.m. so we can beat the heat.
Absolutely.
And then when we do Ironman training, it's like, oh, when are we gonna run? Well, after we get done with this bike ride, so like noon.
Yep.
So we have SufferSooner has a no drop group ride, and then to get us back on track, where you have some group runs and stuff, right?
Yeah. So I personally don't currently have any group runs from my site. I hosted the Runner's Edge group this last Saturday, which is such a great group, and have done that now a couple of times. I lead the group runs for the Running Well store, the Berry Road location.
Okay, so awesome.
They do those one Tuesday a month currently, and so so that's and recently I started publishing a newsletter from my practice, and so provided in that newsletter information about all of the Northland KC group runs. There are a ton of them, really.
There is a lot, yeah.
Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays are all really, and Saturdays are really loaded with lots of options for, and it's so much fun. I obviously my beginnings were in running solo, but it's so enjoyable to get out with folks that are cut from the same cloth and, swap stories, and they never tire of talking about, running with you like, others may. And so, it's a great experience. Always uplifting. And I've been doing that for the Running Well stores now, the last couple of years. And so really encourage, their motto is runners of, all abilities. And all ages, and really try to welcome and be very, very inclusive in that regard. And so it's a lot of fun. And what's super nice about the Running Well store group runs is you get to whoever the sponsoring shoe representative is that particular month, you get to try out their shoes if you want to on the group run. And
nice.
Get to see what you think of whatever it is that they've got available. Usually they'll have 3 different models available that you can run in, and then come back, and free beverages and free snacks, and usually some giveaways, some raffles. So it's good stuff. Good time.
Oh, that's great.
Nice.
That's great. Yeah. So well, that's good. So you would, and then, one of my last questions is, what's the vibe of the Midwest running scene? Do you see it growing since, COVID, everything kind of took a hit, and then it was kind of like, triathlon took a big kind of hit, and then, is running kind of up on the up? Or...
Yeah, so that's interesting for me to hear that triathlon took a hit, but I understand. I can't say that running did, from this perspective that I think you had so many people go, wow, what can I do and not wear a mask and get out and move my body and relieve some of the stress and because we were all under just so much stress. And I think what you saw is a lot of people really, make their way into running. I think what we've seen over the course, and especially since I've been in the space, intimately in the space the last couple of years, is I've just seen a tremendous growth in, we were just talking about the group run scene. Like you see a tremendous turnout at some of these group runs. And, recently there was, what was it that went on? The Running Well store sponsored, it was Brooks, and they did a club crawl, and they sort of featured different run clubs throughout the whole city. And ran the entire month. And so yeah, I think actually you see the opposite. I mean, in terms of, like race registration and those types of things, they're always on the rise. Boston, you all have probably heard the recent news about Boston 2025, record number of registrants who met the Boston qualifying standards. So
they're making the standards harder.
Yeah, Boston's dialing it down again, and just to make it as the competitive scene that they want it to be. And so, yeah, I think actually running has actually trended the other way, where you've seen actually a huge influx of folks making their way into the sport. So
that's awesome.
That's the thing I love about running, is that the bar to entry is kind of just, you need some shoes and some shorts that don't chafe, and then you're kind of good to go.
Can-do attitude, and you're good.
And and then,
on the surface, right? And then you have folks like myself over here that are seeing those folks begin in that way, and then unfortunately continue too long and end up with something going awry. I love the simplicity of running as well. It's a beautiful thing. So it's one of those sports where you can definitely overdo it, especially when you start out, and then it's always one of those things I always tell my athletes to kind of like look back at their previous runs from the week, from the month, from 2 months and all that stuff, and just see where you were, and then just kind of like everybody wants to see this instantaneous growth and stuff like that, and just think of yourself as just kind of like you're on this slow grind to where you want to be, and it takes a while, but eventually you get there. Yeah,
you got to have the perspective.
Yeah, it absolutely, and it does take time. And I think we have these amazing bodies that have these beautifully responsive aerobic engines, and we think, well, hey, you know what? I did 12. Why can't I do 13? And next week, why can't I do 14 or 15? And the next week, why? But the issue is the capacity behind that, and the musculoskeletal system is not following at that same trajectory. Yeah. And so it's that aerobic engine that we love so much is kind of deceptive in that regard. So
well, great, man. I'm super excited talking to you, and I had time has flown by on this for sure. Like, and I think we should have you on again to talk some other running related lore and myths and things that me and Danny disagree about running.
Well, you know what? We can just use you as a case study going forward.
Oh yeah,
that's right. So, yeah.
We'll have real stuff. No, thanks for having me on. Absolutely appreciate the privilege. Thanks for what you're doing in this space to really elevate the standard and provide people with a quality source to be able to go to for information. I know I messaged you, Travis, after I listened to, I think the first podcast, and I just said, good stuff. Like keep doing this. This is great. So
we're just trying to get, more people, if we get more people riding bikes and running and doing triathlon, if this podcast helps anybody, that, I'm all about it.
That's all we're trying to do is help people out. Like, we talk about all the mistakes we've all made, and we all have our battle stories, but you just hope the people can get out there and get active and enjoy doing it. So
absolutely.
So good. All right. Well, thank you again for everything, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Check out Sharon at Endurance Running GP or PT. Sorry, there's dyslexia right there. PT.com. It's a good place to get a hold of her, and then Endurance Running PT at gmail.com if you need to email her. So awesome. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please, if you like what we are doing here, leave a like, rate us, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. It really helps us grow and finds us more SufferSooner squad mates. And remember, when the finish line feels impossibly far away, we don't give up, we push harder, we dig deeper, and we find solace in the knowledge that our suffering is temporary and our resilience is forever.